The day had started like any other for him. Meetings, schedules, reminders, and a long list of things waiting for his signature. He barely looked up from his tablet as his driver guided the car through the morning traffic. It was supposed to be a short visit, nothing more than a formal gesture. His company sent donations to a small community center every year, and the staff there insisted he visit at least once. He usually avoided these kinds of events, not because he didn't care, but because he never knew what to say or how to act. In places filled with people who shared warm smiles and familiar laughter, those things didn't come naturally to him anymore. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance with the calm face he always wore. The staff greeted him with excitement, shaking his hand, thanking him, showing him around. He nodded politely at everything, keeping a safe distance. He didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable around him, but he also didn't want anyone to look too closely at him. It was easier that way. The center was full of small children playing, drawing, and running around. Their voices echoed through the hallway, making the place feel alive. He watched them from afar with quiet curiosity. Kids were unpredictable, and he never really knew how to talk to them. They said whatever was on their mind, and he didn't know how to respond most of the time. Still, he admired their energy, even if it made him feel like an outsider in the room. The coordinator thanked him again for the company's support and explained the new programs they were planning to open. He listened carefully, nodded again, and checked the time when no one was looking. He didn't want to be rude, but he truly felt like he didn't belong there. After a few minutes, he excused himself politely and started making his way toward the exit. He thought he had slipped away unnoticed. But just as he reached the door, he felt a soft tug on his coat sleeve. It was so gentle that he almost didn't feel it. He turned, expecting maybe a staff member or a volunteer, but instead he found a little girl standing there, looking up at him. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, small, quiet, with big, curious eyes that looked like they were holding a secret she wasn't sure how to share. Her hair was tied in a small ponytail, a little messy like she had been playing for hours. He blinked, unsure what to say. She didn't smile, but she didn't seem scared either. She just held his sleeve like she didn't want him to disappear. He crouched down slightly so he could meet her eyes without towering over her. He wasn't used to this kind of moment, and it made him strangely nervous. Odd. But something about her calm expression told him she wasn't just playing or looking for attention. "Hello," he said slowly, hoping he didn't sound too serious. "Do you need something?" She didn't answer at first. She looked at his hand, then at his face, as if trying to decide if she could trust him. Then she took a small breath. The kind children take when they gather courage they're not sure they have. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. He nodded. "Of course." Her fingers tightened on his sleeve, and her voice dropped even lower, like she was afraid someone might laugh at her. "Could you be my daddy for one day?" The words felt like a punch he never saw coming. It was such a simple question, spoken with such innocence, yet it shook him in a way he didn't expect. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. He didn't know how to respond because he wasn't sure he had heard her correctly. He looked around, quickly expecting a parent to rush over, maybe someone playing a joke, or maybe the child simply confusing him with someone else. But no one came. The volunteers were busy organizing supplies, and the children were still running around the room. He looked back at her. She was serious, completely serious. He began, but he didn't even know what he was about to say. The coordinator noticed the scene and hurried over. She bent down beside the girl and gently loosened her hand from his coat. "I am so sorry," she said, giving the girl a soft look. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't ask people things like that without telling us first." But the girl didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look like she had done something wrong. She simply stepped a little closer to him, like she was afraid someone might take her away. "It's important," the girl whispered. He swallowed. He wasn't used to feeling thrown off balance, not in boardrooms, not in interviews, not anywhere. But this tiny voice had somehow pushed him straight into unfamiliar territory. "It's all right," he said to the coordinator. "Let her speak." The coordinator hesitated, then nodded. She stepped back, giving them space. He turned his attention back to the girl. "Why do you need someone to act like your daddy?" he asked gently, choosing his words carefully. She looked at the floor. For a moment, dragging her shoe against the tile like she was thinking very hard. "School day," she finally said. "We have a family day. Everyone has to bring someone, a mommy or a daddy." She paused, lifting her eyes again. "I don't have a daddy, and my mom is working. She can't come." Her voice was steady, but he saw something else behind it, a small ache she was trying to hide. He felt something in his chest tighten, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He didn't know what bothered him, more the loneliness in her voice, or the fact that she seemed already used to disappointment. The coordinator stepped forward again and explained quietly, "She overheard us saying that you visit rarely, but are a kind man. I think she believed that meant you would help her." He let out a slow breath. Kids didn't hide their hearts behind complicated words. They said what they felt. And this little girl was standing there, waiting for him to decide her fate, with one yes or no. He didn't respond immediately. He wanted to think. He wanted to choose the right words. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also didn't want to make a promise he couldn't fulfill. "How long is family day?" he asked gently. The girl's face lit up just a little. "Only in the morning," she said. "We do games and drawings and reading." He nodded slowly. He didn't smile much, but something in her eyes made him want to soften his expression, even just a little. "And your mom knows you asked me?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No. She said she will try to talk to her boss, but she already tried last time and they said no. Don't want her to feel sad again." Her words were too grown for such a small child. The kind of words that come from living with a strong mother who struggled quietly. He stayed quiet for a few seconds. A few children ran past them, laughing. Someone called out from the art table. A volunteer walked by holding juice packets. Life moved on around them, but he was stuck in the moment, unable to pull himself away. He straightened up slowly and looked at the coordinator. "Is it allowed?" he asked. The coordinator gave a faint, hopeful smile. "If the mother agrees, yes, but only if you are comfortable." Comfortable, he wasn't. Not at all. He felt completely unsure, completely unprepared. But when he looked down at the girl again, he knew comfort wasn't the question. The question was whether he could look at her eyes again after saying no. The girl tugged gently at his coat again. "Please," she whispered. "Just one day. I don't want to be the only one sitting alone." Those last words hit him harder than anything else. He had been that child once sitting alone, pretending he didn't care, pretending it didn't matter. He knew exactly what that felt like. And he wouldn't wish it on anyone, especially not a little girl who had done nothing but be brave enough to ask for help. He took a slow, deep breath. "I will talk to your mother," he said quietly. The girl's eyes widened, glowing with a sudden spark of hope. She wasn't smiling yet, but her whole face softened, like she finally believed things might turn out all right. The coordinator looked relieved. "Can call her," she said. He nodded again, though he still felt unsure inside. He didn't know what he was stepping into. He didn't know why this child, out of all the people he met in his life, had shaken his calm so easily. All he knew was that he couldn't just walk away, as they guided him to the small office to make the call. The girl followed closely, holding onto the side of his coat like it was something precious. She didn't speak again, but there was something in her steps, a small bounce, a tiny piece of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. And he realized something quietly, something he hadn't expected when he woke up that morning. This wasn't going to be just a simple visit anymore. This was the beginning of something he didn't understand yet, something that might change both their lives in ways neither of them saw coming. PART to 1,400 words approx. The small office inside the community center felt even quieter than the hallway outside. The moment he stepped inside, he felt a slight pressure in his chest, the kind that comes from stepping into a situation you weren't prepared for. The walls were covered with colorful drawings made by children, simple shapes and bright colors, but every picture reminded him that this wasn't a business meeting. This was something far more personal. The coordinator pulled out her phone to call the girl's mother. The girl sat in a chair against the wall, her feet dangling above the floor, swinging nervously. She kept glancing at him as if checking whether he was still there. He didn't say anything to her, but when their eyes met, she gave a small, shy half-smile like she was afraid to hope too much. The phone rang 4 times before someone finally answered. The coordinator explained gently what had happened, choosing her words carefully. He listened to one side of the conversation, trying to read the coordinator's face and guess the reaction on the other end. The girl watched too, her hands gripping the sides of her seat. After a few minutes, the coordinator hung up and turned to him. "She's at work," she said softly. She sounded surprised, but not upset. She asked if she could come here during her break. "She wants to meet you and talk about it." He nodded. He understood. If he were a parent, he might react the same way. The girl let out a tiny breath, as if she had been holding it for too long. The coordinator guided them to the activity room again, saying the mother would arrive soon. As they walked back in, the girl walked a little closer to him, almost like she wanted to hold his hand, but wasn't sure if she was allowed to. When he noticed her hesitation, he slowed his steps slightly so she wouldn't fall behind. Inside the room, children were still drawing and laughing. A volunteer offered him tea, which he accepted more out of politeness than anything else. The girl sat at a small table and picked up a crayon but didn't draw. She kept glancing at the door. He sat nearby, sipping tea and pretending to look around while his thoughts wandered. He couldn't understand why the situation felt so heavy. It was just one day, one school event, something that shouldn't have meant much. Yet somehow, to this little girl, it meant everything. It made him think about his own childhood. He didn't talk about it often. He didn't like remembering how many things he had to do alone. How many times he had watched other kids with their families while pretending he didn't care. He wondered if anyone had ever looked at him the way this girl was looking at the door waiting for someone who may or may not show up. About 20 minutes later, the coordinator approached him. "She just arrived," she said softly. The girl jumped off her chair immediately. Her small footsteps echoed across the room as she ran to the entrance. He followed slowly, giving her space. When he reached the hallway, he saw her hugging a woman wearing a simple work uniform. The mother's face looked tired, like someone who had been running on very little sleep for weeks. But the moment she hugged her daughter, her eyes softened. He paused a short distance away, not wanting to interrupt. The mother looked up after a moment and finally met his eyes. She gave a polite nod but seemed unsure how to greet him. She whispered something to her daughter, who nodded and stepped aside. The mother approached him with gentle caution in her steps. She looked like someone who didn't want to take anything for granted, someone who had learned to expect very little from the world. "I'm sorry you were put in this situation," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't annoyed, just apologetic, almost embarrassed. "She didn't mean to bother you. She's just been very nervous about this school event." "She didn't bother me," he said honestly. "She just asked me for something important." The mother lowered her eyes for a moment. "She told me last week that she didn't want to be alone for family day again," she said. "I tried to get the morning off, but my boss said we don't have enough staff. I didn't want her to think I didn't care." She glanced gently toward the girl, who was watching them intently. "But she's been trying so hard to act grown. I think she just reached her limit today?" He listened quietly, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He remembered the girl saying she didn't want her mother to feel sad again. That simple sentence now made even more sense. "I only want to know one thing," the mother continued. "Did she ask you because she felt forced, or because she really trusts you?" "I think she asked because she saw hope," he said. "She said she didn't want to be the only one sitting alone." Those words made the mother close her eyes for a moment, as if trying to hold herself together. She nodded slowly. "She's a brave child," she whispered. "Braver than I was at her age." The girl moved closer, standing beside her mother and lightly tugging on her sleeve. The mother rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder and looked at him again. "I don't want to ask anything that would make you uncomfortable," she said carefully. "But if you are willing, and only if you truly want to, would you be able to take her to the family day event? I'll sign whatever permission form the school needs." He had expected the question, but hearing it from the mother felt different. It wasn't a child's hopeful wish anymore. It was a mother's gratitude mixed with hesitation. A request made only because she had no other choice. "Yes," he said finally. "If it helps her, I'll do it." The girl's eyes widened with joy, and she almost jumped, but stopped herself, as if unsure whether she was allowed to celebrate. Her mother looked relieved, though still slightly nervous. "I appreciate it," the mother said. "I know you're a busy man. She won't trouble you, I promise." "She's not trouble," he replied gently. The mother smiled, then small, tired, but genuine. She turned to her daughter. "See, someone said yes to you because you asked so bravely." The girl beamed, her eyes shining. For the first time since he met her, she looked like a child who felt safe. They all moved to a quieter corner to talk about the details. The mother explained the time, the address, and the activities. He listened carefully, taking mental notes. She apologized again for asking him to step into such a personal role, but he shook his head each time. He didn't want her to feel ashamed for needing help as they spoke. He noticed the girl quietly holding onto the side of her mother's shirt with one hand and his coat with the other, like she didn't want to lose either of them. There was something incredibly innocent and pure about the gesture. The mother eventually checked her phone and sighed softly. "I have to go back to work," she said. "My break is almost over." She bent down to her daughter. "I'll see you after my shift. Be good, all right?" The girl hugged her tightly. "I will," she promised. The mother straightened and looked at him again. "Thank you," she said. "Really, thank you," he nodded. Sometimes words felt unnecessary. After she left, the girl turned to him with a shy but excited look. "Can you really come?" She whispered. "Yes," he said. "I'll be there." She smiled, so wide it made his chest feel strangely warm. It wasn't the kind of smile people gave him in boardrooms or meetings. It wasn't polite or forced. It was pure, grateful, and full of trust. For the next half hour, the girl showed him her drawings, her small cubby where she kept her crayons, and the puzzle she had almost finished. He listened, asked questions, and found himself strangely relaxed. There was no pressure here. No deals to close, no deadlines hovering over him. Just a child who was happy he stayed, when it was finally time for him to leave. The girl followed him to the entrance again. She stopped a few steps before the door, as if she didn't want to go too far. "Will you come tomorrow to meet me before the school thing?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied. She nodded slowly. Once, twice. Holding on to every word he said, "Thank you," she whispered, almost like she was afraid the moment would disappear. He left the center with a feeling he couldn't name. Not heaviness, not confusions, something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something warm. He looked back once through the glass door. The girl was still standing there, watching him leave with a hopeful face. And for the first time in a very long while, he felt like someone was waiting for him. The morning of the school event arrived sooner than he expected. He woke up earlier than usual, long before his alarm. His mind kept replaying the small voice he heard at the community center, the one that had asked him softly if he could be her daddy for one day. It was strange how such a small question had stayed with him, how it had quietly taken space in his thoughts even while he was working. He dressed simply, choosing clothes that looked friendly enough without looking too formal. He wasn't sure what people normally wore to these school events. He only knew that he didn't want to look like a CEO walking into a place filled with families and excited children. He wanted the girl to feel comfortable. That mattered more than anything else. His driver offered to take him, but he declined. He wanted to go on his own, without anyone fussing over him. The drive wasn't long. The school was located in a quiet neighborhood with small houses and clean sidewalks. Parents walked with their kids, carrying lunchboxes and backpacks. He watched them for a moment through the window before stepping out of his car as he approached the school gate. He noticed the girl standing there with a small backpack and a big, hopeful smile. She was holding a paper in her hand, maybe something she needed to show the teacher. When she saw him, she ran forward a few steps, then slowed down suddenly, almost as if she remembered she didn't want to appear too excited. "You came," she said softly, but her eyes were shining brightly. "Of course," he replied. "I told you I would." She held that smile for a long second before glancing around shyly, as if unsure whether it was all right to walk beside him. He gave a tiny nod, and she moved closer, walking just a little behind him at first. After a few seconds, she touched the side of his sleeve lightly, the same way she had at the community center. It wasn't a full hold, just a small, careful touch. But he understood that it was her way of saying she trusted him. As they walked into the school, he could feel eyes turning toward them. Teachers, parents, kids, they all noticed him. Some recognized him from news articles or company events. A few whispered to each other, trying to confirm whether it was truly who they thought it was. He didn't mind the attention, but he didn't want the girl to feel overwhelmed. So he bent down slightly and asked her, "Where should we go first?" She pointed to a room decorated with colorful paper cutouts. "We have drawings first," she whispered. "Then games." He nodded. "Lead the way." She guided him to her classroom. Inside, other children were sitting with their parents or grandparents. Some glanced at the girl curiously. Others just kept working. The teacher greeted him politely, but he could see the surprise in her eyes. He wasn't sure if she knew about the arrangement beforehand, but she asked no questions and welcomed them like any other pair. "Please take any seat," she said warmly. They sat together at a small table with pencils, crayons, and blank sheets of paper. The table was tiny for him, and he had to sit carefully so he wouldn't bump anything. The girl giggled softly when she saw how he folded his long legs to fit. "You okay?" she asked with a shy laugh. "Yes," he said, giving a small smile. "This chair is just different from what I'm used to." She laughed again, covering her mouth. It was the first time he had heard her laugh freely, and something about the sound made him feel lighter. The teacher announced that they would be drawing our favorite memory. The children got excited immediately, picking out crayons and colors. He waited for the girl to choose her colors, not wanting to push her. She picked up a blue crayon and started drawing small circles on the paper. "Is that your favorite memory?" he asked gently. She nodded. "It's the sky. The day my mom took me to the park, when she didn't have to work, we laid down and looked at the clouds." "That sounds nice," he said. "Did you find any shapes in the clouds?" She nodded again. "I saw a big cloud that looked like a puppy. My mom said she saw one that looked like a shoe, but it didn't look like a shoe to me." He chuckled softly. Maybe she wasn't very good at cloud shape guessing. The girl smiled again, and he felt that same warm feeling spread through his chest. It surprised him how easy it was to talk to her, how natural it felt. He wasn't used to being around children, but she made it simple. There was no pressure, no expectations, just pure, quiet trust. They finished their drawings, and the teacher walked around the room praising each child. When she reached their table, she stopped for a moment, admiring the girl's picture. "You drew the sky again," the teacher said fondly. "You love that memory, don't you?" The girl nodded proudly. "And he helped me," she added, glancing up at him with gentle pride. The teacher smiled at him. "You're doing very well. Thank you for being here with her today," he nodded, feeling unexpectedly touched by the teacher's gratitude. Next came the games. The first one was a simple relay race. Children had to run, pick up a small ball, and bring it back to their partner. The girl hesitated at first, unsure if he wanted to participate. He noticed her looking between the game setup and his face. "Do you want to join?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Only if you want to." "I do," he said. Her smile returned. Their turn eventually came, and she ran as fast as her tiny legs allowed. When she came back holding the ball, she handed it to him. He jogged across the room and came back, a little faster than necessary, which made her laugh again. "You're too fast," she said. "I'll slow down next time," he promised. When they finished the race, the teacher announced the winners. They didn't win, but that didn't matter. The girl looked happier than he had ever seen her. There were more activities: a reading circle, small puzzle challenge, and a snack break. During the snack break, the girl sat close to him, eating her fruit quietly. Some parents glanced in their direction, whispering softly. He ignored it. The girl seemed unaware of the attention, and he was grateful for that. A woman sitting at the next table leaned toward him. "She's a lovely child," she said kindly. "Is she your daughter?" He hesitated for a second. Before he could reply, the girl answered for him. "He's my daddy for today," she said proudly. The woman smiled warmly, not questioning it further. "Well, you're doing a wonderful job." He didn't know how to reply to that. A strange tightness formed in his throat. He simply nodded. As the day continued, he watched the girl blossom. She wasn't shy anymore. She raised her hand during class questions, laughed during games, and held his sleeve during every activity. She introduced him to her friends with quiet pride, saying, "He came for me today." He realized something as he watched her. The reason she asked him wasn't because she wanted a father figure for the long term. It was because she wanted to belong just for one day. She wanted to stand next to someone when all the other children were standing with their parents. She wanted to feel like she wasn't alone in the room, and he understood that, feeling too well. The final activity was a simple sharing circle. Each child had to say one thing they liked about the person who came with them. Some kids said funny things. Some said sweet things. When it was the girl's turn, she looked at him, her eyes gentle and sincere. "I like that he didn't say no," she said quietly. "And I like that he stayed with me." Her voice was calm, but he felt the weight of her words. He hadn't realized how much his simple presence meant to her, and something inside him tightened softly, painfully, but in a way that felt like a beginning rather than an ache. When the event finally ended, parents began gathering their things. The girl stood close to him again, looking up with a relaxed smile. She wasn't nervous anymore. She wasn't unsure. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I wouldn't have missed it," he said. She reached out carefully and took his hand this time, holding it firmly without hesitation, and he let her. Feeling something inside him shift in a way he couldn't explain. It was only one day, but it had changed something in both of them. The night felt heavier than usual for him. The city lights outside his apartment window glowed softly, but he barely noticed them. His mind kept going back to the little girl's words. The way she had hugged him so tightly at the park. The tremble in her voice when she asked why people only cared for others when they were useful. It echoed in his chest like a quiet bell that refused to stop ringing. He had returned home after spending the afternoon with her and her mother, so something in him felt restless. He kept pacing from room to room, unable to settle down. He didn't feel like a CEO at that moment. He didn't feel like a man who had built a huge company. He felt like someone who had been shaken awake by things he didn't see coming. After almost an hour of walking in circles, he finally grabbed his phone and sat on the couch. He stared at the screen, wondering if he should text her mother. A simple message just to ask if she reached home safely. He typed it twice and deleted it twice. He didn't want to look strange or make her uncomfortable, but he also didn't want to say nothing at all. At last he wrote, "Did you both get home safely?" Then he hit send before he could overthink again. He waited, his leg bouncing slightly. After a few minutes, his phone buzzed. "Yes, we reached safely. Thank you again for today." She hasn't stopped talking about it. Smiled without realizing. He typed, "I'm glad. She's something special." He erased the last sentence because it felt too personal. Instead, he wrote, "I'm glad she enjoyed." He set the phone aside, but his thoughts didn't quiet down. He wondered where all of this was leading. He wasn't a man used to mixing his life with strangers. Everything he did was plan meetings, deals, interviews, schedules. But this was something he didn't know how to plan for. The next morning, when he arrived at the office, his assistant gave him a worried look. "You look tired," she said softly. "Didn't sleep well," he replied. "Too many meetings." He almost said yes out of habit, but stopped. "No," he answered. "Just thinking." His assistant blinked, surprised. She had worked with him for years and rarely heard him talk like that. She didn't ask more. She simply nodded and carried on. But his mind wasn't on the work in front of him. He tried going through documents, signing papers, reviewing reports, but every few minutes his thoughts drifted back. He thought about the small apartment the girl and her mother lived in, the struggles her mother hinted at, and how the girl had learned to hide her worries behind bright smiles. He thought about how brave she was, asking him to be her dad for a day. Brave but also heartbreaking. A sudden idea crossed his mind, surprising even him. Before he could talk himself out of it, he called his assistant. "Can you clear my schedule for the afternoon?" She blinked again. "The whole afternoon?" "Yes." "Should I tell the board?" "Tell them it's personal." She didn't ask anything else because the seriousness in his voice said enough. When noon came, he took the elevator down, walked out of the building, and sat in his car thinking. He didn't know exactly what he planned to do, but he knew he needed to see them again, not for business, not for obligation, but because something inside him said it was the right thing. On the way to their neighborhood, stopped at a small bookshop. He remembered how the girl pointed at books in the park and said she loved stories, but couldn't buy new ones often. He walked inside and asked the shop owner to help him choose a few books for an 8-year-old. The owner, pleased with the request, picked out a stack of fun stories, gentle lessons, colorful covers. He paid for them and carried the bag back to his car. When he reached their area, he saw the familiar cracked road, the old buildings, the children playing barefoot in the alley. It wasn't a dangerous place, but it was far from comfortable. He didn't know how long they had been living like this, but it made his chest tighten just imagining it. He called her mother. Was unsure if she was home. She answered, surprised. Is everything all right? Yes, he said. I'm nearby. I was wondering if I could drop something off. Okay? Pause, then a gentle reply. You can come. We're home. He walked up the stairs to their apartment, holding the bag carefully. She opened the door, and though she looked surprised, she didn't look annoyed. The girl ran to the doorway as soon as she saw him. You came, she shouted, smiling wide. Her joy was pure and bright, and he felt something inside him soften even more. The apartment was small, but warm. A tiny sofa, a small table, a stove that looked old but clean. He admired how her mother kept everything neat despite how little space they had. I brought you something, he said, handing the bag to the girl. She opened it slowly, peeking inside. When she saw the books, she gasped. All these? For me? He nodded. I thought you might like them. She hugged the bag like it was the greatest treasure in the world. Thank you. I'll read every one. Her mother looked touched too, though she seemed a little embarrassed. You didn't have to do this. I know, he replied quietly, but I wanted to. The mother motioned for him to sit, though she apologized for the limited space. He shook his head and said he was comfortable. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, opening the books one by one, smelling them, touching the pages, smiling at every new story she discovered. Her mother watched her, then said softly, You don't understand how much this means to her. He looked at the woman and saw tired eyes that still carried hope, a strength built from years of doing everything on her own. He suddenly had the urge to ask how she managed all this, how she stayed calm, how she raised her daughter with so much love when life kept giving her difficulties. But he didn't ask, because it felt personal, and she already shared enough. Instead, he asked, Are things getting better for you both? She hesitated. Some days, yes. Some days, no. I'm trying my best. That's all I can do, he nodded, understanding more than he expected. They talked for almost an hour about school, rent, work, life in general. It wasn't the kind of conversation he expected to have with someone he barely knew, yet it didn't feel awkward. It felt grounding. At one point, the girl climbed onto the sofa beside him with a book in her hand and asked, Can you read this to me? Just one page? He froze for a moment, completely caught off guard. No one had ever asked him to read a bedtime-style story before. He worked late most nights, lived alone, and never imagined himself doing something like this. But when she waited with those hopeful eyes, he couldn't refuse. Sure, he said quietly. He read slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. She leaned against him without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing to do. Her small shoulder rested against his arm, and he felt a strange warmth he didn't know he needed. Her mother watched the scene from the kitchen area, and though she didn't say a word, he felt her gaze soften, maybe with gratitude, maybe with surprise, when he finished the page. The girl whispered, You read nicely, chuckled. I'm glad you think so. Before long, he realized it was getting late. He stood up, though he didn't really want to leave. The girl walked him to the door, still clutching one of the books. When will you come again? She asked. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what the right answer was. He didn't want to make a promise he might break. He didn't want to confuse her or give her expectations he couldn't meet, but then she looked up at him with that familiar, innocent hope, and he felt something settle in his chest. "I'll come soon," he said softly. "I promise." She nodded, satisfied, and waved until he reached the stairs as he walked out of the building. He felt something shift inside him. He had come there thinking he was helping them, but instead, he realized they were helping him. They were pulling him out of a life that looked full but felt empty. They were reminding him what genuine connection felt like. He got into his car and sat silently for a long moment. Staring ahead, he didn't know what the future held now. He didn't know where this bond would lead. But for the first time in years, he was willing to follow something without needing to plan it. And deep down, he already knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The following week felt longer than usual for him. Work moved forward as it always did. Meetings, calls, reports, but something inside him had changed. Instead of going straight home, he now found himself pausing when he reached the parking garage, wondering if he should visit them again, wondering if he should call first or simply show up. It surprised him how often he thought about them. The girl's smile, the way she hugged the books he brought. The light in her eyes when he read to her those thoughts stayed with him, even in the busiest hours. And the mother's quiet strength, the way she listened more than she spoke, the softness in her voice, even when she was tired, all of it kept pulling him back. One afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the girl's mother. "Sorry to bother you. She has a small school event today. Parents can come. If you're free," she said it would make her happy to see you there. If not, no pressure. His heart stirred. He read the message twice before replying. "What time?" She sent the time and address, adding a little note at the end. "Please don't feel obligated." But he already knew he was going. He left the office earlier than usual. On the way, he stopped at a small shop and picked up a simple bouquet. Not too fancy. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. It was just something sweet for the little girl, nothing more. When he reached the school, he felt oddly nervous. Parents stood in small groups, chatting, holding snacks or little gifts for their children. He wasn't used to these environments' bright walls, children running around. The warm noise of families gathering, he spotted them at the far end of the courtyard. The girl was standing beside her mother, holding a small cardboard star decorated with glitter. When she turned and saw him, her whole face lit up. She didn't hesitate for even a second. She ran straight toward him and threw her arms around his waist. "You came," she said, her voice full of excitement. "Of course," he answered, resting a hand gently on her back. "I said I would." Her mother approached more slowly, her expression a mixture of surprise and gratefulness. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm glad I could," he replied. The girl proudly held up the cardboard star. "We had to make something about someone who inspires us," she explained. "So I chose you." His breath caught for a moment. The star had his initials written in the center with colorful lines around it. It wasn't fancy, but it meant more than anything expensive he had ever received. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him as if the answer was obvious. "Because you show up." Those 3 words hit him deeper than anything else. It sounded simple, but for a child who hadn't had anyone consistent in her life, it meant everything. They spent the next hour watching performances by the students. The girl kept glancing back at him to make sure he was still there. Every time their eyes met, she smiled little. Warm smiles that made him feel like he was doing something right. When the event ended, they walked out together. The girl kept holding his hand without asking permission. It felt natural, as if it had always been that way. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked, looking between him and her mother. Her mother opened her mouth as if to say no. He's probably thinking about money, but he stepped in gently. "Ice cream sounds perfect." They walked to a small shop near the school. The girl chose the brightest flavor she could find. He and her mother chose simpler ones. They sat outside on a bench while the girl ate happily, swinging her feet. After a few minutes, her mother looked at him with a soft but serious expression. "I hope she's not bothering you too much." "She's not," he said. "I enjoy spending time with her, and with me." She asked lightly, though there was a hint of nervousness in her tone. He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he answered honestly. "With you too." She didn't reply right away. She looked down at her cup, stirring it slowly. Life hasn't been easy for her. I've tried my best, but I know she needs more than what I can give. "You're giving her love," he said. "That's the foundation." She looked at him again, and this time her eyes held something fragile, something honest. Sometimes she asks me why her father never cared. I tell her some people don't understand the value of what they have. But deep down, it hurts me too. He didn't know what to say. But something inside him tightened a quiet, protective feeling he couldn't explain. The girl finished her ice cream and leaned against him, tired from the long day. He gently brushed a bit of ice cream off her cheek. Her mother watched them both. He could see the question forming behind her, eyes not spoken, but felt. Over the next few weeks, things became more regular. Not planned, not formal, just natural. He visited when he could. Some days, he helped the girl with homework. Some days, they all ate together. Some evenings, he simply listened as her mother talked about work struggles, or school issues, or whatever was weighing on her. He didn't fix things for them. He just showed up again and again. One evening, he invited them to a quiet park. They walked along the path lined with soft lights. The girl ran ahead, chasing small shadows, leaving her mother and him walking side by side. "I worry sometimes," her mother said suddenly. "Not about you, but about letting myself trust something peaceful." He slowed his steps, listening. "When life has been hard for too long," she continued, "nice things feel strange, like they're temporary, like they'll disappear." He understood. He had felt that in his own life too, success without meaning, achievements without warmth. "I don't want to disappear," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "I'm still figuring out what all this means," he admitted. "But I don't want to walk away from either of you." Her expression softened, and something unspoken passed between them, something delicate, something real. A moment later, the girl ran back, laughing, pulling both of their hands. "Come see the ducks." She shouted. They followed her, and when she took one of his hands and one of her mother's and linked them together, none of them pulled away. It wasn't a romantic moment. It was something deeper, a connection forming in its own quiet way. It's unforced and natural. As weeks turned into a couple of months, their bond strengthened. People at his company noticed he smiled more. His assistant noticed he left work on time more often. He noticed his apartment didn't feel so heavy anymore. Life did not suddenly become perfect, but it became meaningful. One rainy evening, the girl asked him a simple question while they sat inside their apartment, reading, "Will you be in my life when I grow up?" He felt his throat tighten. Before he could answer, her mother stepped into the room, looking nervous, but he didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "I will." The girl hugged him so quickly he almost dropped the book. Her mother watched them, tears in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. Later that night, when the girl fell asleep, he walked her mother to the doorway. The soft rain tapped against the windows. She stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "She sees you as something important now," she whispered. "Something steady." "I know," he replied. "And do you want that?" she asked. He took a slow breath, then nodded. "I do," she exhaled, like she had been holding that question inside for too long. A small smile appeared on her face, certain but hopeful. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For choosing us," she said softly. He shook his head gently. "You two chose me first." They stood there for a moment, simply looking at each other, both understanding something without needing to say it. Not a promise of a perfect future, not a declaration of anything, too heavy, just an unspoken truth. Their lives had become tied together in a quiet, beautiful way. When he finally stepped outside, the rain had lightened. He walked to his car, feeling something settle inside him, something peaceful, warm and real. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was honest. He had walked into their lives by accident and stayed by choice. And sometimes, that is the strongest kind of family.